Welcome to Left Africa.
So take a second and just check the device in your pocket right now.
Yeah, or, the car in your driveway, especially if it's an EV.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Because the battery keeping that smartphone alive, or that heavy lithium-ion pack sitting under the floorboards of your car, it is very likely funding one of the most violent, heavily armed rebel groups on Earth.
It's a heavy thought, yeah.
It really is. And until a few weeks ago, the international community was just completely missing the target on how to stop it. I mean, we interact with these sleek, perfectly engineered pieces of technology every single day.
Right, it feels so clean.
Exactly. You buy a device, it works, it charges, it connects you to the world. It feels totally detached from the physical Earth.
It totally does. It creates this illusion that our technology is just a product of pristine laboratories and automated assembly lines.
Yeah.
But when you actually peel back the layers of the supply chain and trace the raw materials back to their source, that polished image just shatters. We are talking about a foundation that is violently contested. This isn't just some distant story about foreign policy. It is literally the raw, physical bedrock of the 21st century global economy.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. Today, we're working through a stack of notes, research, and excerpts anchored by this really eye-opening piece titled "The Blood in Your Pocket, U.S. Sanctions Rwanda's Conflict Mineral Empire."
It's a fantastic piece of reporting.
It really is. So our goal today is to trace the journey of critical minerals. Specifically, we're looking at gold, coltan, cobalt, and lithium.
The big four.
Right, the big four. We are going to follow them from war-torn mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo, across the borders into Rwandan refineries, and ultimately straight into the global supply chains that build the devices in your hands.
And along the way, we're going to untangle this massive, high-stakes geopolitical chess game that's happening basically entirely out of public view.
Which is wild because for a very long time, the international community has approached the instability in Central Africa in a very predictable way.
Yeah, a predictable and mostly ineffective way.
Right, relying on diplomatic scoldings and, localized peacekeeping.
But now we're looking at a recent, completely unprecedented bureaucratic action from the United States that signals a total tearing up of the old playbook.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our sources highlight recent sanctions issued by the U.S. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC.
Right, OFAC.
Usually when we hear about sanctions in a Central African conflict zone, it's a list of rebel commanders.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the warlords in the jungle, the guys actively holding the weapons. But this move is entirely different. OFAC sanctioned 4 Rwandan mining companies and 2 businessmen.
Which is a huge shift.
Huge. They explicitly targeted a facility in Kigali called the Gasabo Gold Refinery. And, my initial reaction was to compare this to taking down a major mafia family.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right, because you don't neutralize the mob by arresting the street-level enforcers.
No, they just get replaced.
Exactly. You go after the accountants, you go after the guys washing the money through legitimate front businesses. This is a major shift because the U.S. is targeting the infrastructure directly for the first time.
What's fascinating here is that sanctioning a militia commander in the Kivu region, it's mostly theater.
Right. Doesn't do much.
No, because a warlord doesn't have a corporate checking account in Manhattan. They don't care about their international credit rating.
Right. They're operating in a completely different reality.
Exactly. But by targeting the Gasabo Gold Refinery, the U.S. is going after the corporate plumbing that makes the warlord viable in the first place.
Okay, so what exactly did the Treasury accuse them of?
Well, they're accusing this facility of actively laundering conflict gold extracted from territories controlled by the M23 rebel group.
Which raises a purely mechanical question for me. I understand how you launder digital cash through shell companies.
Sure.
But how do you physically launder a rock? You have tons of raw physical ore moving out of a conflict zone.
You literally melt the evidence.
Yeah. Wait, really?
Yeah. So gold mined in the Kivu region of the DRC has a very specific metallurgical profile. It contains trace elements that can tell an assayer exactly where it was pulled from the earth.
Oh, wow. Like a fingerprint.
Exactly like a fingerprint. But smugglers move this raw gold across the porous border into Rwanda. They hide it in the trunks of cars or just in foot traffic.
Just walking it across.
Yeah. And once it reaches a facility like Gasabo, they melt the conflict gold down in the same crucible with scrap metal, Or maybe with small amounts of legally mined Rwandan gold.
Oh, okay, I see where this is going.
Right. They pour it into a fresh Doré bar, scamp it with a Kigali hallmark, and suddenly the chemical and geographical signature of the conflict zone is completely obliterated.
That is why.
It gets loaded onto a cargo plane to Dubai or Zurich, and the global supply chain just accepts it as legitimate Rwandan gold.
So the system is designed to be intentionally blind.
Pretty much, yeah.
But then how does an OFAC sanction actually stop a physical refinery operating in another sovereign country? I mean, Gasabo isn't on U.S. soil.
It all comes down to the plumbing of international finance.
Okay.
OFAC sanctions basically weaponize the global dominance of the U.S. dollar.
Oh.
When a company is placed on the specially designated nationals list, every global bank, shipping insurer, and logistics company is forced into a brutal choice.
Which is what?
They either sever all ties with Gasabo immediately, or they risk losing their own access to the U.S. financial system.
Oh, wow. That is powerful.
It is. The physical refinery in Kigali might still have electricity and smelting equipment, but financially, it just evaporates.
They're radioactive.
Exactly. They cannot pay suppliers, they can't insure cargo flights, and they cannot clear transactions in international reserve currencies.
Which totally cripples the financial engine.
Right.
And that brings us back to the group actually digging this gold out of the ground, which is M23. Reading through the notes, M23 saw a massive resurgence in late 2021.
They did, yeah.
And the territory they are seizing in North and South Kivu, it isn't just random jungle. This is some of the most concentrated, mineral-rich real estate on the planet. We are talking about massive deposits of lithium, cobalt, coltan, and gold.
Literally, the precise ingredients required to manufacture a smartphone battery, an EV motor, or a laptop.
Right.
So the U.S. Treasury is making a formal, documented statement that these Rwandan companies are not just innocent bystanders buying ore in a tough neighborhood.
Yeah, they're not just passive buyers.
No. They basically function as the financial wing of the M23 rebellion, and this shifts the entire paradigm.
How so?
Well, the United States is attacking the physical mining infrastructure directly now, rather than just playing this endless game of whack-a-mole with individual militia leaders.
There is a quote from an economist in the source material that completely recontextualizes this for me. They said, "The wars we've had for 30 years are economic in nature."
That is the key to understanding all of this.
It really is. Because when you read international headlines about the Great Lakes region of Africa, the conflicts are almost exclusively framed as, ethnic clashes or ancient territorial disputes bubbling over into chaos.
Right. It paints this picture of just irrational, uncontrollable violence.
Yeah. But framing it as ancient tribal hatred completely misses the reality on the ground.
Totally. It is a highly rational, deeply structured, brutal enterprise.
Right.
I mean, M23 operates much more like a militarized mining corporation than a traditional rebel group.
Wow, a militarized mining corporation.
Yeah. Controlling territory means controlling the mines. Controlling the mines means you possess a product that the global tech market is just absolutely desperate to buy.
So the violence is just a business tactic.
The violence is simply a tool used to secure the supply chain. When M23 pushes a front line forward, they are securing a business asset. They set up toll booths, they tax the artisanal miners, they issue transit receipts.
It's basically a cartel.
Exactly. By hitting the financial architecture in Rwanda, the U.S. is essentially trying to freeze the bank accounts of a hostile corporate entity.
I understand the logic there, but it leads to this glaring, almost absurd contradiction.
Which is?
If this operation is as highly structured and industrial as you describe, they cannot be doing it in secret. A massive refinery processing gold carried over the border requires paved roads, electricity, and, the tacit approval of the host government.
Yes, it does.
That points directly to the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame.
You absolutely have to look at Kagame's position to understand why this dynamic has persisted for so long.
Let's lay out the image that we in the West have been sold regarding Kagame, because it is incredibly persuasive.
Oh, very.
If you look at Western donors, development banks, the elite panels at Davos, Paul Kagame is treated as a visionary.
A total darling of the West.
Right. He is credited with stepping in and rebuilding a shattered country after the horrifying 1994 genocide. He championed putting women in parliament.
And if you travel to Kigali today, diplomats will eagerly point out that it is the cleanest, most orderly city in Africa.
Right, exactly. So consequently, the United States, the UK, and other Western governments have poured billions of dollars in foreign aid and diplomatic support into his administration.
That is the narrative of the Rwandan miracle. Western development agencies desperately need a success story in Central Africa to basically validate their foreign aid models.
Wait, I have to push back on how this functions in reality, though.
Okay, go ahead.
How can the U.S. State Department and USAI pour billions of dollars into a country, celebrate its leader, and then simultaneously have the U.S. Treasury sanction the very infrastructure linked to that same government's proxy forces?
It's wild, isn't it?
It is, and the UN group of experts hasn't been quiet about this. They have meticulously and repeatedly documented that the Rwandan military is providing direct support to the M23 rebels.
So are Western governments essentially funding the government that is backing the rebels they are sanctioning?
It is profound bureaucratic cognitive dissonance.
That's a great way to put it. Western governments are trapped between two completely contradictory desires. On one hand, they want the idealized statecraft and the development success story.
Right.
But far more pressingly, they desperately need the minerals. I mean, Western consumers expect to upgrade their smartphones annually and transition to electric vehicles.
Yeah, we want the newest tech.
And the cold, hard fact detailed in our source material is that the lithium and cobalt powering those consumer devices likely pass through M23 checkpoints and Rwandan transit routes.
Wow.
Kagame understands this leverage perfectly. He knows the West will tolerate a massive amount of cross-border interference if it means the global supply chain keeps moving. The tech industry needs the ore, so the diplomats just look the other way.
So the exact same materials that are keeping our modern, progressive, quote-unquote, green economy humming along are the very materials keeping the Kalashnikovs firing in the Kivu region.
Exactly, which is why experts view these new OFAC sanctions with cautious skepticism.
Oh, really?
Well, a publication from ISS Africa recently noted that minerals for security deals won't save the DRC. For 2 decades, the international community has attempted these transactional approaches.
Right.
They treated the extraction of minerals as a bargaining chip, basically operating under the assumption that they could purchase stability.
Yeah.
And that strategy has failed entirely.
The Foundation for Defense of Democracies, the FDD, echoes that exact sentiment in our notes. They state clearly, sanctioning blood gold is smart but not enough.
Their critique points to a structural flaw in the sanctions.
Which is what?
If you only shut down a single refinery like Gasabo, but you failed to dismantle the broader network, the transit routes, the border checkpoints, the export logistics flowing through Rwanda to the global market, then these sanctions just act as a temporary inconvenience. The market will simply adjust, and a new facility will open. You have to change the actual geography of the supply chain.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because looking at the map is where this geopolitical chess game gets truly fascinating.
It really does.
If Washington suddenly has the appetite to crack down on a longtime ally like Kagame, it is highly unlikely to be a sudden ethical awakening about conflict minerals.
No, definitely not.
This is about global supply chain supremacy. This is Washington versus Beijing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the transition to green energy means whoever controls the refinement and processing of these critical minerals basically controls the economic growth of the next century.
Right.
Currently, China has staggering dominance over the global refining capacity for cobalt and lithium. And Rwanda, structurally and economically, is heavily integrated into supply chains that flow eastward.
Okay, so our source material highlights this massive U.S.-backed infrastructure initiative called the Lamido Railway Corridor.
This is key.
The objective is to build a rail network that takes these critical minerals straight from the mines in the DRC and Zambia and transports them directly west through Angola to ports on the Atlantic Ocean.
By moving the minerals west to the Atlantic, you cut the transit time from weeks down to days.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
But more importantly, you completely bypass the East African ports that are heavily integrated into Beijing's logistics networks.
It is essentially a giant geopolitical bypass surgery.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. The United States is looking at the board and realizing that the modern Cold War isn't going to be fought with nuclear standoffs or traditional armies. It is being fought with railway permits, infrastructure loans, and supply chain routing.
Exactly.
They're trying to physically draw a line in the ore, redirecting the flow of the future's most vital resources away from Beijing-aligned choke points.
Recognizing that structural vulnerability explains both the timing and the target of the OFAC sanctions.
Makes sense.
If China controls the refinement of the minerals required for the 21st century economy, the U.S. operates at a severe strategic disadvantage. So the Lamido Railway serves as the physical infrastructure solution to that problem, while the sanctions on Rwandan front companies act as the financial solution.
So you squeeze the eastern route with sanctions while rapidly building a western route with rail lines. But, while Washington and Beijing maneuver these massive infrastructure projects and deploy targeted sanctions, we really need to focus on the people actually living inside this geopolitical extraction zone.
We absolutely do.
We cannot get lost in the macroeconomics and ignore the reality inside the Democratic Republic of Congo. So let's rewind to the year 2003. That marked the formal end of the Second Congo War.
Right.
Historians refer to it as Africa's World War. It pulled in 9 different nations and claimed the lives of over 5 million people. When the peace accords were finally signed, the global community promised a peace dividend.
And the underlying theory was that once the territory was stabilized and the guns fell silent, the immense mineral wealth of the nation could finally be regulated, taxed, and basically utilized to build the nation itself.
We're talking about demobilization, reconstruction, paved roads, schools, and functional hospitals.
No, real infrastructure.
The international community congratulated itself, believing the Congolese people would finally reap the rewards of living on the most valuable real estate on Earth. Yet, 23 years later, that peace dividend never materialized.
It's tragic.
M23 and dozens of other armed factions simply entrenched themselves. The eastern DRC is a patchwork of militias, each holding on to their own specific vein of ore. War has stopped being a disruption to daily life. War has become the fundamental business model.
It represents the ultimate paradox of plenty. Just consider the sheer scale of the resources.
Okay.
The Democratic Republic of Congo holds over 70% of the world's known cobalt reserves.
70%?
Yeah, and cobalt is the essential stabilizing element in the lithium-ion batteries that is supposed to power the global green energy transition. Without it, the atomic structure of the battery degrades rapidly during charge cycles and becomes a severe fire hazard.
Wow, so we literally can't do it without it.
No. And on top of the cobalt, they possess vast deposits of coltan.
Let's talk about the science behind Coltan for a second, because it's mentioned constantly in the notes. Why is it so irreplaceable?
So, coltan is refined into a metal called tantalum. And tantalum has a really unique capacity to store and release electrical charges incredibly smoothly.
Okay.
And it does this while withstanding extreme temperature fluctuations. As consumer demand forces tech companies to make smartphones thinner and processors more powerful, the tantalum capacitors have to become microscopic.
Right.
There's basically no synthetic substitute that performs as well. Without tantalum from the DRC, the processor in your phone would essentially fry itself under normal use.
So the country literally has everything the modern economy requires to function.
Everything.
And yet the extraction model ensures it has almost nothing for its own citizens. The supply chains that were promised to lift these communities out of poverty are instead funding the very militias that keep them displaced and terrorized.
Devastating.
The source material points out an incredibly brutal, tragic irony happening right now. In this year, 2026, the DR Congo national football team, the Leopards, actually qualified for the FIFA World Cup.
A monumental achievement, truly. Marking their first appearance in the tournament since 1974.
It is a massive moment of national pride. They are going to travel to North America to play on the biggest sports stage in the world.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean? Think about the pure emotional whiplash of that reality. The Leopards are going to run out onto the pitch. The entire world is going to cheer for them. Millions of fans will be tweeting their support, watching the highlights on glowing screens powered by coltan and cobalt.
It's a lot to process.
We will celebrate the resilience of the Congolese people on the field, while entirely ignoring the fact that the devices in our hands are physically funding the militias burning down villages in the players' home region.
This raises an important question, and that juxtaposition synthesizes exactly why the transactional approaches we discussed earlier have utterly failed.
Right.
You simply cannot celebrate the spirit of a nation while structurally treating its land as an expendable extraction zone for global convenience. The OFAC sanctions on the Gasabo Gold Refinery, they're a meaningful shift in strategy. Recognizing and targeting the financial engine of the M23 is critical. But as long as the global demand for these minerals remains insatiable and the supply chain remains opaque by design, the violence will simply adapt and find a new route to the market.
Which brings us entirely back to you listening to this deep dive right now. We started by asking you to think about the battery in your phone or the electric vehicle in your driveway.
Yeah.
The question looming over every single consumer, every major tech manufacturer, and every policymaker from Washington to Brussels is identical. Whose phone is made with conflict cobalt? Which electric vehicle is running on lithium laundered through a rebel checkpoint?
That's a question we have to answer.
Until our global supply chains are forced to trace every single ounce of ore and answer that question honestly, the underlying system won't change. The blood in the ore will keep flowing, neatly packaged inside sleek glass and metal.
I would leave you with one final structural thought to consider.
Okay.
If the global push for a green transition requires an exponential massive increase in the extraction of minerals like cobalt and lithium, and our current supply chains are this inextricably tied to militia violence, are we quietly accepting a terrifying trade-off?
Wow.
Are we accepting that achieving clean energy in a pristine environment in the West requires permanent, localized resource wars in the global South? Can a truly green future be built on a foundation of conflict extraction?
That is a heavy, complex question to carry with you today. Thank you for joining us on this intricate journey. It is a challenging topic, but understanding these mechanisms is the only way to make sense of the reality behind the everyday world we navigate. Stay curious, look much closer at the everyday objects you take for granted, and keep questioning the hidden systems operating just out of sight. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.